Machines learning and humans leading. Now, with AI and machine learning being really huge talking points, I think it's led to a lot of scaremongering, when it comes to the thought of AI or robots potentially making the human workforce redundant. I know I get a lot of emails about that all the time, which is why I'm pleased to say that instead of focusing on how machine learning will replace jobs, you're about to discover how it's being used to make employees more productive and how machine learning is amplifying leaders and companies all around the world. So to talk to you all about that, please welcome to the stage Dr. Tommy Weir, the founder of the world's first leadership AI lab.
So how many of you are concerned about a robot, automation, AI, machine learning taking jobs in the world? How many of you are concerned about this? Now, as I used to hear this term, I would think about it and I would begin to look and I would say, a robot at work, and I just could not picture a physical robot sitting in a conference room right beside me and carrying on and having this discussion. And then it really hit me that it's actually an invisible robot that everybody's talking about, not the scientific stage of that, although those will be showing up in some workforces for definite sure. But this topic began to brew and began to brew. And as we listened to it, 90% of the people that have been surveyed are concerned that AI is going to take jobs away from people. 90% of the people, and it started this huge debate, I'm going to rephrase that. It has reignited a huge debate that is going on in the world that is the man versus the machine. Are we right as humans to build machines that are going to replace people in the workforce? But as you think about this argument, it's not a new argument. Actually, it's incredibly old. In 1793, Eli Whitney made the cotton gin. And when Eli Whitney made the cotton gin, an argument started to come up immediately saying that's going to replace workers in the field. He was the inventor that started bringing technology, per se, very primitive technology, into the agricultural sector. And then as we move forward and we get into the 19-teens, the whole debate came back to life again with the assembly line, and here we're looking at Henry Ford and beginning to replace some of the workers with using the assembly line and the evolution of industrial era. And then we came more into our lifetime era of looking at this, and the personal computer started showing up, and I do remember those primitive days of the personal computer showing up. And again, the personal computer is going to replace every job in the world. I remember that debate. I remember living through that. Many of us raised our hands saying we're concerned about AI replacing our jobs. We've been through this debate, but I have a question. How many of you have jobs today? So nearly everyone in the world has a job. I still have a job. I still continue on. So we made it through the cotton gin. We made it through the assembly line. We've survived the personal computer. I think the debate and the question we should be asking is not, will the machine replace our jobs? But actually it comes back to man and machine together, human and machine, rather than pitting them at odds with each other. The real discussion, the real point is bringing the two together. And what I want to talk to you about today is using machine learning actually to help leaders become better. That's going to drive this agenda. 2 years ago this month, actually this coming weekend, one of the top leaders in Dubai said to me, he said, join me in Tokyo, let's go learn about AI. And I said, this is fantastic. I've always wanted to go to Tokyo. Now I want you to notice, I didn't add, I always wanted to learn about AI to the end of that statement. So he's like, let's go there, it'll be the two of us, we're going to learn about AI, we're going to do this immersive aspect. I didn't know if we were going to school, I didn't know if we were going to go to a movie on AI, I had no clue what we were going to do. I wanted to go to Tokyo. I had never been in Tokyo before, and I was excited about going to Tokyo. So we get there, and we go to dinner our first night, and the next day we get picked up, and Joey Ito, the head of MIT Media Lab's there, and several other professors from MIT Media Lab. At one point there were 8 tutors and 2 of us. Now we were definitely outnumbered. But flying there, I was thinking to myself, I don't believe in AI, but I won't tell him. I'm like, it doesn't really seem to work. At the end of the day, there's a person behind it, and I really had this negative view. And I remember the first day we were there, it was a Saturday, and as the day was going by, about halfway through the morning, around 10:30, we're in the van. We've done some looking at AI, applied AI in physical space, and I'm rattling my mouth in the van, and Joey turns to me, he says, "Tommy, could you please shut up?" And I'm like, "Sure, I can, but why?" He goes, "You are so ignorant on this topic, you don't even know it. Learn a little bit first, and then you can have an opinion." So time goes by, and I'm starting to see examples, and we were inside, we were Sony's labs, we were inside looking at Google driving cars, we were, as I said, physical space, we were looking at how it's used in regards to work environments, and all of a sudden I started seeing evidence, and I started seeing proof. And we got into philosophical debates about, can AI have empathy? What are the rights that should go on specifically with a machine? And I left. And I got on the plane flying back. And I had gone from being an utter skeptic to a cheerleader, started asking myself the question that's up here. And I started saying, what's the relationship between AI and leadership? My whole adult life has been in the space of executive leadership. I work with great CEOs and chairmen every day of my life. My doctorate's in leadership. It's the one topic I knew. But this really started getting to me, and I started thinking, what's going on here? What could happen? And I fast forward a year, and the same person, we got into this discussion about productivity that was going on. And specifically, we were talking about a decline of productivity growth that's happening in regards to Dubai at that particular time, and to some areas that he's leading and some other components. And he said, what should I do? Now, I spouted out at the mouth, kind of knowing what I was saying, but not completely. I said to him, I said, you should build a productivity engine. He said, yeah, I like that. I said, you should use AI in it. Now, at this point, I'm the cheerleader for AI. I understand that there's an algorithm in it. I understand that there's people called a data scientist, but I would by no means say I really knew what I was saying when I said that. So I said, you should use AI, and he goes, do it. And I walked out of the room, and I kind of said, oops, I probably shouldn't have said that out loud. I should have bit my tongue. So I got this crazy idea, and I went and hired a team of data scientists. We hired PhDs out of Berkeley, we hired from Columbia, we hired from University of Chicago. I mean, we hired a rock star set of data scientists, and positioned them and said, let's figure out how we can solve this issue of productivity. Now here's where it gets really creepy and a bit scary. If you were to do an open market survey, which has been repeated over and over, and ask employees, how productive are you in a given day? The answer circles right around the 3-hour point. So they would say, I work 8.5 hours a day, but of those hours, only about 3 of those are productive. So we're at this daunting hill of realizing that people think they work hard, but they know they're not productive. Now this is actually one of the surveys that was done, and I want to take point number 1 and point number 10 just to kind of highlight what goes on in a day. 47% of the people doing this said they spend 44 minutes a day, a work day, on social media. So of the hours that they're supposed to be working, they spend almost an hour, 3/4 of an hour, literally on social media. You can read through some of the others, but the final one is absolutely the kicker to me. 19% of the people spend 26 minutes a day looking for a new job while they're at work. So they go to work, they turn up, that's 1 out of 5, to put this in perspective, spend a half an hour a day while working looking for a new job because they don't like the job that they have now, or they want to replace that job. So productivity is kind of this big issue. So I hired this team that came together, and I sat down with them and I said, let's begin by this. Let's codify the skills that are actually involved in leadership, and then begin to figure out which of those skills can better be done by a machine and which of those can be done in human. And the reason that we did this, and the reason that we dove into that, was because the problem actually isn't a productivity problem. The problem is a leadership problem. So if you were to go through the history of work, there was a supervisor. Remember that, hearing about these supervisors that had that clipboard? And they would literally stand in the room while people were working, and all they would do all day is watch the worker. They didn't go to meetings, they didn't check email, they didn't have a different set of KPIs, They didn't have a strategy to come up with. They didn't have budget meetings to go to. They didn't have all of this work on their own. They came to work. They took their clipboard. They watched a team of somewhere usually around 7 people, but it would get up to 10, and they watched them work. And all they did was keep an eye on how they're doing during work. Now, we work in the knowledge era today, where we don't do that. And I'm not sure I would like that, to be really honest with you. I don't think I want somebody actually with a clipboard in their hand. We work in a different era. But what happened when we shifted to this different era is we let it go. We let go of time. We stopped paying attention to it. 80% of the workforce on average are individual contributors. Frontline managers are about 10% of the workforce. So this 10% oversees 80%. But there's something that we need to say about them, and I'm sorry for anybody in the room who happens to be at that level. They're usually the least experienced level of leadership in a company, for obvious reasons. Their recent promotions into that. It's the first management job. But we trust the management of 80% of the workforce to the least experienced level of our leadership. So we began looking at this and let's codify what's going on. So here it is. Sitting behind everything that we know leaders should do. So we know leaders should do things like to plan. We know leaders should write a strategy, to craft a direction. We say leaders should demonstrate empathy. We say leaders should communicate. They should build a team. These are terms we use. But sitting behind that, when you actually codify it, are 4 key things. One is insights. Leaders ingest information. The human leader ingests limited, ad hoc, biased information. A human leader has a limited number of interactions with an employee. Now, I can look at a week, and I may have somebody that reports to me, and let's, for the sake of this, say we actually work 40 hours, which we don't, but let's just say that you actually work 40 hours, and I may spend somewhere between 30 minutes and 2.5 hours with them. If I'm a good leader, I make sure that I have 30 minutes one-on-one with them, but if I ask how many of you have had a one-on-one for 30 minutes with your boss, whoever is your boss, okay, every week for year upon year, I don't think many of us would have a hand in the air. So they don't see me one-on-one. They see me in a context of others. And they see me from a very limited point of view. So the information I take in is quite small. The other thing is, we forget. That was the biggest learning I had when I left Tokyo. How much I forget. How much information comes into my head. I laughed when you said earlier about you learn as fast as a human does. Okay, I actually said so it's quite slow. I was being kind of tongue-in-cheek sarcastic. I'm not knocking the economists at all in that statement, but we forget a lot. They remember far more than we do, okay? So we forget. So it's limited, it's spotty, it's ad hoc, it's incomplete, and it's biased. That's the insight I have as a leader, as a human. But then we go to the next step, and we begin to look and we say, and then we make predictions. You will make a prediction which way to get home tonight. You won't think about the prediction you're making, but you'll go, if I do this, this will happen. If I do that, that will happen. And you will run a bunch of if-then statements through your brain. We run those through our brains all day long as leaders. We're not conscious we're doing it. It's not the forefront of our thought usually, but all day long, we are literally making a prediction. If, then this will happen. So if I address this issue with him right now, he may not work as hard today. Wait, will he demotivate others? I won't make that prediction. I won't make that, have that discussion today. I won't confront that. If I wait till tomorrow, what will happen? If we make this decision in the marketing, this will go on. We play this out regularly. We make predictions in our mind. But again, we make limited predictions because we make predictions out of what's called the 3 E's, our education, our experience, and our exposure. We make predictions out of that set. Then we get to the next one, which is judgment. Once we make the predictions, we execute judgment. We decide which is right, which is wrong. And this is the transition to where I would say we should free leaders to start coming into the game. The insights should come from the machine. Machine learning has much better insights, They're more comprehensive, they're complete, and while there's bias in AI, it's reduced bias compared to human bias in regard to the bias that's sitting in AI. So we should actually use machine learning for our insights. We should use machine learning to make predictions and to bring those predictions forward, and we should even let it say, what would you do? And then from there we pick up, and what we do as leaders, we elevate our starting point. And then from there we get into actually the execution. The execution, unless you're moving into process automation and the automation side, is still heavily human dependent. There's always going to be a role for a leader. So we took this and we took company data. And what we did is we wrote a series of algorithms. I'm going to take you behind the scene on one of these. And we ingested 2.5 years of one company's data, similar about 3 years of another company's data, and we adjusted all of their timestamp data. And believe it or not, most all of your day is timestamped. It's recorded. You don't think about it. Everything you do in Oracle is timestamped. Everything you do in SAP is timestamped. Every email that you send, read, think about reading even, is timestamped. Every keystroke you take is timestamped. Every time you switch program A to program B, it's timestamped. Every time you go to Google the News, it's timestamped. It's there. It's recorded. There's a history of it. Every calendar is timestamped. Every proprietary system that a company has is timestamped data. Your day is literally a series of milliseconds put back together from a data point of view. It doesn't have a lot of flavor. That's what we used to think, until we began to look at it and began to figure out what's going on. And then we realized that there's a 261% variance in how long it takes 2 employees to do the exact same task. 261% variance. So to put this in perspective, if it takes you 10 minutes to do something, it takes them 36 minutes, 26 more minutes to do like for like work, because you can parse it down to that level. We found out that a department of, this is probably the most interesting one to me, a department of 81 people is reflective of what this company is doing as a whole, which is reflective of what open market opinion surveys have done, which is also reflective of academic research. They do 13.2 tasks per hour, each task ranging 1.5 minutes each, which works out to 20 minutes, which works out to 3 hours of productive work per day. You can start to see the guy that shows up, works hard for 15 minutes. I can show you this in an app now. And then for the next 30 minutes goes on a coffee break. You can say the guy who takes an hour-and-a-half lunch, comes back, works 15 minutes, and then takes a siesta for 45 minutes. I had a particular customer looking at this today, and they asked if he was Spanish. They said, is he taking a siesta? What's going on in that? So what we did is we figured out that we can use data, and that we can actually use our, we wrote algorithms to sit on top of it, and we can know what an employee is going to do. And because we can know what an employee is going to do, we can predict what they should do, but here's the most important part. We can make a recommendation to help a leader lead them to do this, not to fire them, not to get rid of them, not to punish them, not to write them up, not to reprimand them, but to look and to say, you're an asset that we have invested in. We can help you become the best you can be. Because we help the leader become the best to help the person become the best. It has a very positive role in it. So I want to take you behind the scenes in our 2 minutes together. So as I said, we ingest data from every system that a company has. We're system agnostic. We're not worried about the type of the data. We're not even tremendously concerned about the quality of the data, and I need to say that hesitantly because our team is rock stars when it comes to working with spotty data and getting the noise out of it so they can get to the points that matter and reducing the variance out of it. And then from there, we've written what's called the trigger task time algorithm. So a trigger is the characteristics of the work. So this would be coming in and looking at in regard to the characteristics of the work. So if we were in healthcare and we were in surgery, this would be looking at the difference between, am I doing a heart transplant or am I doing a simple broken bone repair? So there's a difference that's related to that. It should take a different amount of time. There's different components that are involved in it. If we were in retail, So we're on the shop floor. If I am in Louis Vuitton or I'm in Gucci or I'm another high-end brand, that is a very different sales transaction than if I'm in Tim Hortons and I'm selling coffee. There's characteristics in the work. Then there's also characteristics in the task. A task is what a person does day in and day out, the actual work they do. Generally, it's actually quite reduced when you look at it, although there are 18,000 of those, but we work to get down to the specific task that's happening, and then we look at the interaction of the two. They happen at a time. There's a time that these go on. And then we start to look at the spacing of the time. What's happening around this dimension that we think of time, and how can we use these to feed back to the leader to make recommendations of what to do? Now, one of my fascinations is, I grew up in an era of paper maps. So when I grew up, you had this giant paper map you had to pull out. And I can remember listening to I can remember listening to my parents, shall we say, debate or argue on this point. And I can remember in the early stages of marriage going through the same thing. And one party would say, why don't you look up where we're going? I think you're lost. And the other party would say, no, 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 I know where I'm going, as we drove around the block in circles, repeatedly. And getting more and more frustrated the driver would be, and the passenger would argue the point more and more vehemently. And I was at our office last week in Silicon Valley, and we were up in San Francisco, and we were going to a coffee shop literally 2.5 blocks from the hotel, which I had already been at that day, okay? And the cup was in my room, was where this idea came from. And one of our data scientists is like, yeah, let's go there and grab coffee. I go there every day also. And what does he do? He reaches in his pocket and pulls up Google Maps to go where he knows where to go. Why did he do that? He did that for the very reason that leaders are looking for help. They want guidance. One of the most common requests we hear in organizations is, I want help. I want guidance. I want support, but my company is unable to give it to me in the way I need it at the times I need it. Now, we've come up with these great, huge learning tools that just flood you with information. So I could, if I'm proactive enough, I could say, how do I give feedback to somebody? And I can go Google that, and there's some systems that would put that in your face. But what we're really looking for are the tips that trigger into my mind, you should give feedback today at 2 o'clock because this is what's happening and this is what's going on. Leaders want the guidance, but it's too expensive. It has historically been too expensive for companies to give that. But with the bringing together of machine learning and the data, the cost is all of a sudden plummeted to where it's actually almost a steal to begin to put a recommendation in a leader's hands to help them become the best they can be, because the realization is the fact that humans will always work. People will always be working. So it's time for us to actually help the leaders be better, to grow productivity exponentially, and to do that, what we're able to do is to use data and machine learning to make a transformation in the workforce. My general belief as I close is the machines learning and humans leading is the next logical step for both artificial intelligence and leadership science. Thank you very much.